Policy and bad governance have direct impact on the people of a country. South Africa is no different from any other country that's feeling the impact of these. But there are still some opportunities and pockets of growth despite all these difficult circumstances. Let's discuss bad policy, poor governance and slow economic growth now. That's been brought on by these factors with Nicola Comninos, Purple Group Chief Risk Officer and board member at the Institute of Risk Management, South Africa. Nicola, good afternoon. Welcome to today and thank you very much for your time and patience. I mean, there is no arguing that if you don't have the right policies and you've got governance, you've got a very dangerous cocktail that will affect your economic performance.
No, exactly, Dan. Thanks very much for having me online today. I think just working now for a fintech startup group for the last year and a half, before I worked at Purple Group, which is a JSE listed company, a fintech group that's been around for about 20 years with a whole host of startup businesses within the group. And prior to that, having worked at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for many, many years, I can certainly tell you now firsthand experience in terms of how these very, very challenging economic conditions are impacting us, which I would put in the group of small, medium and micro enterprises. In the fintech group at Easy Equities, we've got businesses such as Easy Properties, Easy Crypto, etc. These businesses are under immense pressure as we see a tsunami of regulation. We've seen increased cost of compliance. We've seen the economic recession and a livelihood crisis in the country. And many of that, the root cause, exactly as you pointed out, is just looking at policy and looking at governance elements in terms of the support that we can certainly get from the policymakers, from the regulators, so that we can invest in startup businesses like ourselves and invest in what we very direly need in terms of economic growth.
Yeah, before we unpack that scenario, those opportunities further, you said you are no longer with the Purple Group, you are now with a fintech company. Did I hear you correctly?
No. I am with Purple Group. We're a fintech startup group.
Yes, okay, you're a fintech startup group. Okay. Yeah, everybody hears the fintech. I mean, a couple of years ago, fintech was like a buzzword. Okay. Now, are there real opportunities there that can assist? Because there has been a degradation of capacity and ability, and there's low growth currently in the country.
Exactly. No, Dan, it's extremely challenging circumstances at the moment. But what I was saying is I previously used to work at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for many, many years, about 15 years. And so I've only been with Purple Group for the last year and a half as the Chief Risk Officer for this business. And I can tell you now, I think the key growth opportunities in our country practically lies in partnerships. What we've done to build up Purple Group and the various startup businesses in our group, such as Easy Equities, Easy Properties, Easy Crypto, is really through partnership and collaboration. We partner with other startup businesses. We collaborate in terms of combining capital together, partnering with large institutions such as, I'm just going to use a few examples, Sanlam Investment Holdings is a large partner of ours, Satrix, Capitec, Discovery Bank, Telkom, etc. Small fintech startup businesses really can only get to scale if we end up being able to leverage partnerships in the ecosystem. And so I think, Dan, just to talk to the challenges that we're facing at the moment in the country, I just do want to just refer us to the concept of a polycrisis, which is not a new concept. It's been coined in the 1970s, but we've seen now recently the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report, as well as the Institute of Risk Management of South Africa's risk report, refers to this phenomenon, which is really what we're seeing not just in South Africa, but globally, a cluster of related global risks which really has a compounding effect. Yeah. So instead of individually impacting, the overall impact exceeds the sum of the parts. And unfortunately, that's exactly what we're seeing, not just locally, but globally as well.
Yeah, in a poly-crisis environment that you've just explained in South Africa, where's the biggest risk? Where are the biggest risks?
Yeah, sure, Dan. We have lots of debates when we pull the Institute of Risk Management report together annually. We interview leaders across the South African business environment as well as public sector. And so really it's a combination of thought leadership across the board. And some of the risks that we've identified for this year has really been elements around failed state, which is really at the heart of the top risks, which is if all of these other risks materialize on the periphery, things like systemic failure of public infrastructure, the national grid failure, proliferation of illicit economic activity, economic collapse, all of these things materializing simultaneously essentially brings us to the biggest risk that we potentially face, which is a failed state. What I do want to mention, though, Dan, is I was just looking at the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report this morning and reading the top risks that have essentially manifested in the last year. We could have very much been reading a risk report about South Africa. They talk about energy supply crisis. They talk about cost of living crisis, rising inflation, and a debt crisis. So the reality is we are sitting with a global polycrisis at the moment, and South Africa is not going to be cushioned from this. Where we really are saying a polycrisis will have to be resolved by having poly responses. And so that just means we'll have to rally around, combine our efforts like we've seen the likes of Adrian Gore and others in the private sector like Business Unity South Africa's CEO, Cas Cavadia, around the 115 CEOs that have signed the pledge to help governments save South Africa. We've seen icons like Jeremy Maggs hosting podcasts about Fix South Africa, focusing on opportunities like investing in startup businesses, innovation, being able to lobby and really have fit-for-purpose compliance and regulation in a country as well as policy that can really support startup businesses and making sure that those public-private partnerships really can deliver value.
Polycrisis needs poly solutions. It also needs poly partnerships, maybe. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That's Nicola Comninos, Purple Group's Chief Risk Officer. She's also a board member of the Institute of Risk Management, South Africa.